Welcome back. Deborah Wilcox's painting videos, and in here I like to offer tips, and we talk about materials, and today we're talking about paints, oil paints specifically, and because there's all kinds of um, things about oil paint that we take for granted or we don't know, like temperature, transparency, light fastness, texture even. So I'm going to talk about that today. There are all kinds of manufacturers of oil paints, more so than there used to be. And there is everything from really inexpensive, you can buy at the craft store, oil paints that are made from gels and dyes, and they kind of, if you're wanting to just play around or have something to work with, they're okay. Don't recommend them necessarily, but if you decide and you're ready to get a little more serious, there's some manufacturers have great student grade paints like Dick Blick does, but locally you might be able to find Winsor Newton, or I don't know if Grumbacher or Gamblin is still around. But there's different grades and levels of paints offered, from a student grade paint to a professional grade paint. And a student grade paint, and I don't know if I brought one in here with me, but the difference between, I don't think I did. The difference between a student grade paint and a professional grade paint. Okay, well here's a student grade paint by Winsor Newton. It's called a Winton, and in the professional grade paint, which this is also a Winsor Newton, but it's a professional grade paint. They probably are both made with linseed oil. And reading them, yes, even the student grade in Winsor Newton is linseed oil. And our professional grade paint, we will have a pigment of this color, and this happens to be Indian yellow, and we'll have a pigment, either it's a natural pigment, organic pigment, of this color, and we might have this much pigment, right? And then we have a binder, which is going to be the oil, the linseed oil, which binds to the pigment, which is in actually crushed powder form. And they mix with the linseed oil. So you might have that much linseed oil, and then you have a little bit of filler in a professional grade paint. And it's just a very high quality, nice paint. In your student grade, especially with Winsor Newton, they do a nice job. Been using this brand of my students for 25 years. They might have less pigment, right? A little more binder, which is the linseed oil in this case, and maybe a little more filler. But I found these two, to the undiscerning eye, you can't tell the difference between a professional grade and a student grade in the Winsor Newton brand. I don't have that much experience. Well, I do have some with like the Dick Blick brand, and I would have to say the same for them. What I look out for is when they say safflower oil is the binder. I'm not crazy about safflower oil. That's like this one is the Sennelier paint, which is not cheap. But they mix safflower, I can't say that, with linseed oil, and that seems to work okay too. So that's a little bit about student grade versus professional grade, and pigment binders, which is the oils, and fillers, which is just another kind of, it might be, and this one where the safflower oil comes in, which are just topping it off with a less expensive oil. So we have that when buying paint. So it all depends on your budget and where you're at in your learning or your professional career. Like I said, I really love Rembrandt for myself. I've just got into a Rembrandt. Of course, it's backwards. This one comes in a box. I've just had to order materials. So here's a brand new tube of titanium white by Rembrandt. And right on the box, they tell you that it is made with linseed oil. And I can't see. And there's different qualities of linseed oil too. But the more expensive the paint is, the better quality the linseed oil, and the more refined the pigment is. Well, I've got this white up here. Whites are interesting because whites determine the drying time of our paintings. And Rembrandt's been around since 1899 for one. But like people say, well, what's the difference between like titanium white and flake white and the different whites, and like even Gamblin alone, who puts out a really nice, if you go to the art store, if you can find one of their fold outs about their paints, it's really informative and it's really nice. But in their whites alone, they have the titanium white, like this one, and maybe Rembrandt does too. I just, I'm kind of a creature of habit. But like titanium white, they describe it as the highest tinting strength, which means it takes less white paint to modify your color, to tint it into a lighter shade, a lighter tint. In art, we think of tinting as lightening and toning as darkening, and some people consider that the difference between using white and black. But and Gamblin has a radiant white, but the titanium white for Gamblin, they consider it a fast drying. They use the binder is linseed oil, the tint strength and opacity. Okay, that's like the rating of it. How strong is it, the tint of it? And it's a number 10. They consider their titanium white a warm color. I always say white is a cool color unless you add a warm color to it, because every color that I know that you add white to, especially titanium white, it will cool down that color. And I'll show you in a graph that I use to learn my colors in here in a minute. And then they say the texture, okay? And Gamblin, and I would say that also about Rembrandt, it's a buttery texture. Where you get down into flake white, it dries fast and it tends to be stiff and dense in texture, okay? Zinc white is considered a transparent white, best for use in glazes and scrumbles. And it's slow drying. It's considered a warm temperature, but it's also has a soft texture. I'm into buttery. I just love this buttery texture. I like Gamblin paints and I like Rembrandt. I consider them very similar. And then with the paints, we talk about light fastness and transparency. And on our paints and quality, like this has 3 stars on it, which you can't see, 3 little crosses really, and this colored in black square, and the black square means it's opaque, that it is not transparent. And this is a very high quality, a 3 is a very high quality light fastness rating, okay? That's a lot that means there. Let's look at another color here. All right, this Rembrandt color is called cobalt violet, and you probably can't see, but it has that same little square, but it's not filled in at all, which means it's a transparent color. So that's what I call reading our paints. Here's a Blick Series 3. The color is turquoise light, but on the back it says that they use safflower oil. The light fastness is 1, which is good, and it's opaque, and it is made in France. That color is made in France. I believe the Rembrandts are made in, yes, the Netherlands, okay? They're made in the Netherlands. And what color was it? I was surprised. Oh, Holbein. You know, I really like Holbein, and some of you have Holbein. Here's some Holbein colors. We have like a transparent violet. We have a violet gray. Here's a quinacridone violet. The back and all the printing on it is in Japanese. They're made in Japan, and I couldn't tell you until I learned to translate Japanese what kind of oil they use. I'm looking for the little stars or some kind of permanence rating. The little stars or the little X's on it, you know, 1, 2, and 3 is a permanence. How light fastness, how susceptible they are to fading or their permanence. And I like Holbein. I can't read their labels, so I can't read my paints here. So I would have to look into it. It does say in English, not intended for use with children, okay? And that's probably a good thing. And that brings me to some of our other colors, like the cadmium reds. It is cadmium. I mean, we would consider that a heavy metal. And so that's part of the reason why oil paints are not really suitable for children, and because they get it all over them. And even us as adults painting, I mean, I used to take and wipe my brush on my pant leg, you know, cool painter clothes, but it gets into your skin. Our skin is our biggest sponge, right? And we just don't want that into our skin. So I don't wear gloves when I paint, but I usually keep like wet wipes, and if I get it on my hand, I usually get it wiped off right away. If I get it on the handle of my brushes, which we tend to do, I wipe it right away. And I have students that want to put when they're thinking, they're tapping their teeth or putting the end of their paintbrush, you know, kind of like you chew on a pencil. You really don't want to do that either. I mean, it's paint. It's some of it is more lead based. Another brand is Old Holland, and they have been around forever, Old Holland. But what since 1664, Old Holland paints have been around, and they are made from natural, like this is called Sepia Extra, and it's considered a classic oil color. And it was pretty expensive, but what I found out, they're really concentrated. They're a very dense paint, and it's a carbon-based paint. Okay, so it's a natural umber, and so it is, and it's cold pressed natural linseed oil and pure pigment. What I found with these, they are so dense in color, they're like concentrated. And I found them really hard to use until somebody said, oh, you're supposed to add on your palette, add linseed oil to it. Take a palette knife into your paint on your palette and mix the linseed oil in. That does make it a lot easier to use. But I'm into simple. I am. And they cost so much, and it's just a little bit extra work. You're kind of getting my story. Here's something that this is a Dick Blick color, and it has a permanence rating of 3, which is excellent. It says right here on the back, the vehicle or the binder is linseed oil, and it tells you what the paint actually is. It's an acrylamide yellow, okay? I know, I don't know either. This happens, do you see this gunk, the oil that has leaked out of this tube? Sometimes this happens. It does just happen, especially in a tube maybe that you haven't used in a while, but you know, that's kind of normal. It does tend to dry out the paint, the pigments a bit, but putting it on your palette, adding a little bit of linseed oil mixed into it will bring it right back. So I don't know if Grumbacher is around anymore. I used to use quite a bit of Grumbacher. Trying to see where it's made. I think it was made in Illinois, but they have a whole list of things about their Grumbacher paints. And originally, I think that's what I started in was Grumbacher. Long time ago, Grumbacher was it. Other brands are like Lucas. Here's a couple Lucas paints in my box, but I don't think you can get Lucas anymore. You might be able to. And what's interesting about this, it says on the manufacturer, it's Dr. F.R. Schoenfeld, Grumbacher and Company, Dusseldorf, Germany. So, you know, they come from all over, France and Germany, Holland, Japan. They're just, it's, here's an old Georgian, Dollar Rowan. Now, the only thing I can read on here is that it's ultramarine blue is the pigment. But I can't really read too much else about this. I also believe this comes from, I know it's overseas, but let's see. I'm just curious now. England, okay? This comes from England. Made by Daler-Rowney, Bracknell, England. So there's so many, because we've been painting such a long time, centuries now. And you kind of find what works for you, the type of paint you like, and your budget. One of my students came in with an interesting paint as a white paint, and the tube looked very much like this white one, but it had a number on it. It was called 1080, and it was by Gamblin, and because she needed white paint, and that's what she found, but we weren't getting it to work according to expectations. It just seemed to act differently. So I started investigating the paint she bought, and it was a Gamblin 1080. And what I found out about the 1080 paint is they make them according to the same colors and the same, permanents, and they have so much of the same stuff, but they use marble dust. And I found, and so did my student, that the marble dust in the paint, it does have more of a stiffer texture. It feels a little more, it's just stiff. And to me, it was a little bit grainy, and I couldn't figure out why it was not going on like we were used to, say, the other paint products. So, but I'm not sure if somebody else has used the Gamblin 1080 line of paints that it's made with marble dust. I'd like to kind of hear your comments about it, because I've not had I'm still out. My jury is still out on that paint, because maybe there's something you need to add to it. I'm not sure. So paints also come in temperatures. For every color, like for reds, there's warm and cool reds. Blues, warm and cool blues. Warm and cool greens. For example, we have an ultramarine blue, which is cool and it's transparent, which you can tell that when you just put it on your palette, you can see through it. It's transparent. And then we have a cobalt blue, which actually the cobalt blue is more what I would call neutral in temperature versus like, sorry. And then we got phthalo blue, cerulean blue, which, here we go. Cerulean blue I would consider our warm blue, and the ultramarine is definitely our cool blue. In reds, we have like a Alizarin Crimson is a cool red. It also has a little bit of a black to it. I really like quinacridone red is a beautiful, cool red, and but then like cadmium red is a warm red. In greens, our cool red would be like Viridian. Is our cool green, and it is also transparent. And our warm green would be a sap green, for example, or an olive green. But in every color, there's warm and cool temperatures. And I think it's important to have at least one of each in your paint box: a cool and warm red, a cool and warm blue, a cool and warm green, a cool and warm yellow. It's like, well, okay, we think of yellow as being warm, right? Yellow's warm, but a warm yellow versus a cool yellow. And I use cool yellows in like daffodils, sometimes the more lemony colored daffodils or some flowers. So warm and cool yellows, okay? And as we talked about, and it's only because I have their color chart, because I think Rembrandt does it too. There are warm and cool whites. There's like a warm whites, Portland gray whites, blue cool whites being the Portland gray and Gamblin. But you can cool off a white by adding one of your cool tones and some of your blues or your greens, and you can warm them up by adding a touch of, say, yellow ochre, a touch of yellow or a touch of orange, and you can get some nice warm whites. You can make your own. Black. I don't buy a lot of black. I find that by mixing complementary colors of like quinacridone rose with a Viridian green or a phthalo green, you can get black, but it has a lot more atmosphere, has a lot more depth to it than, say, buying black. But if I do buy black, it's going to be ivory black. There's like, what is it called? Like a matte black. That has kind of a gunmetal feel to it. There might even be a gunmetal black. I like ivory black. If I'm going to use black, it's my choice. There's no right or wrong. Everybody has something that they like. Mine is ivory black. I just like the way it finishes on the canvas. Let's see. It seemed like there was something else I wanted to talk to you about. Oh, water-soluble oil paints. I've been asked about that, and I've had some experience with them. Water-soluble oil paint does not mean you use them like watercolor and you dip it in water and you get in your paint and you paint with it. That makes the oil paint turn rubbery on the canvas. It like gets it gets balled up. It's not meant to be. You paint with it like you would normal paint, and there are mediums for the water-soluble paints that will help them move them, make them more liquidy, but boy, you don't use water. The water is only for cleanup. Water-soluble means for cleanup. And what I know about the water-soluble oil paints I don't like is some of the colors tend to dry a little hazy. But the paints do have like an emulsifier in them that's like a soap, so that they do wash up with water. And I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, somebody will set me straight. But that's been my experience. And like toning a canvas, you can't tone a canvas using water with water-soluble paints. You have to find another solvent like you do with oil paint. In oil paint to tone a canvas, we use a odorless mineral spirits. I mean, you could use turpentine, but that is so toxic for us. So OMS for toning a canvas. Getting to know your colors. Oh, well, the other thing is about texture. There's paints that, like I was talking about, some are buttery, some are stiffer. And there's some paints you can get for building up mass in an oil paint. I've never used them. I've seen them. I've seen paintings with them. And you can actually make them 3D. You know, like if you're building a rock and you want to build up the surface texture, there's actually paints, products that will do that. So that's something kind of different. As far as getting to know your paints, I recommend, and you're familiar with my canvas sheets, okay? So what I like to do, and I'm way behind on doing my own, but what I like to do is come in and put the color as it comes out of the tube. Then I add a portion of white, and then I add the same portion of white again to lighten it, so that you can see what happens to the color when you add white. And as I've said, for me, white will cool off a color, like in this red here. And look how much cooler it is than it comes out of the tube. I put the manufacturer of the paint, because you could take a tube of paint with the same name by different manufacturers, and they might appear a little bit different. So I do that with a lot of my colors, and then I know what it's going to happen with them as I add white to them. And so there's that sheet, and you know, there's so many. This one goes the other way. I'm inconsistent, but as long as I get it done, I don't care. I was looking for all these pink rose colors. I was looking for, because I couldn't seem to get the color for the purple coneflower, the echinacea flower, right? I couldn't seem in my paint box. I didn't have a color that I could even mix with another color to get the color of the echinacea flower. So I set out and I bought several different rose or pinks, and I started playing with them, and I did finally find what I was looking for. So I recommend you do this. Get to know your paints and your brands, because every brand's a little bit different, and they call them different things. So anyway, that's my spiel today on paint. Because they have, they're transparent, they can be opaque, they can be cool, they can be warm, and they have different qualities, from really inexpensive, okay, you know, kind of play around with paints, to a mid-student grade that is pretty good, to high-end professional paints. And once you really discover some good quality products, like I've talked about brushes, good quality products, for one, makes your job so much easier, and it adds a certain life and permanence to all your hard work in your paintings. So be back with you next time. Hope to be starting a commission. I think I'm going to videograph it. I think that's a new word I used. So take care, and we're almost through quarantine here where I'm at. I'm hoping so. I think we're going to mid-May. Still difficult not being able to go to the art store, right? The professional art store. Ordering in, that works too. So anyway, take care, enjoy, keep creating. Bye for now.